Certain dreams are merely brief snippets of daily life, but in 1999, others open a door to the future. An unidentified Japanese illustrator produced an odd little manga that quietly recorded 15 dreams that were predictive. She had previously observed, one by one, those dreams started to materialize, but the last dream is the most horrifying aspect. Has not yet occurred. As per the book, it is anticipated to occur on July 5th, at precisely 5 a.m. 2025. What did you dream about, and why? Has it been bothering readers for more than 2 decades? Let's solve the enigma and watch today's video. Then buckle up as we begin the story for today. But first, if you previously liked and subscribed to according to the video's conclusion, your luck might just music change in Japan on July 1st, 1999. An odd comic book was released. Had a straightforward title, yet with subtly suggestive implications. The future at the time, I saw that hardly nobody paid it. There was no justification for it. Wasn't striking in terms of appearance. Produced by any well-known artist, and it had not been promoted by any media outlet actually. Even if someone had picked it up and flipped it, all they would have seen during it were a string of strange dreams that were recorded in pencil drawings, along with a couple short notes written in the margins appeared to be merely a graphic journal, a dream diary made real with crude illustrations, occasionally erratic, occasionally cryptic, and occasionally so the meaning was so unclear that it was almost incomprehensible. Yet more than on March 11th, 2011, 10 years later, Japan was completely upended by a disastrous, devastating earthquake and tsunami. The country's northeastern area, tens of thousands of people were slaughtered. Thousands were reported missing, and the world listened in horrified stillness as pictures of a high-tech country surfaced. Engulfed by the ocean during those times of bewilderment and anxiety, unexpected a shock wave was sent when the discovery surfaced. Throughout online communities in Japan, someone recalled that long-forgotten comic book, and the discovery they made would astonish the public because 12 and one of the nightmares, years beforehand noted in pencil by the artist, showed what appeared to be a mirror image. Nearly identical to what happened on March 11th, streets flooded by seawater, tsunami, unusual waves crashing inland, numbers such as 311 that show up on the book's cover, as though to alert people to something that none had not yet realized at the time that it was published. The coincidence was too big, too thorough to overlook. Thousands of people started looking for the comic. They went over each page and looked at each drawer, each note in the margins, as though attempting to decipher a code sent by the eventually. They discovered something even more difficult to accept. In that book were 15 prophetic dreams in all. Based on the reader's personal total of 12, and half of them were already realized. Music, when I unexpectedly saw the future, became the focus of public interest. After the catastrophe in 2011, the Japanese public's desired question that was the individual that responded to this behind it. But when everyone's gaze shifted to the work's maker, what they received in exchange was only a quick, uncertain name, the pen name Tatsuki, which had no verifiable data. Nobody was sure who. Even the publisher's address was not. No longer kept any contact information for those who wrote the book. In a world in which almost all knowledge can easily trace the fact that someone may stay totally hidden. For over 20 years produced, everything seems even more enigmatic as Tatsuki's name became well known. Numerous phony accounts started to surface. In social media, imposters asserted that be the genuine author who published afresh alleged dreams of prophecy and pushed public sentiment into a chaotic situation. Some thought this was a planned fake. Others believed Tatsuki was not a person at all, but an organization, or worse, a product purposefully created by unseen forces influencing public opinion. Then in October 2023, right before the fever concerning the manga's prophecies started to rise again, Tatsuki abruptly came back, and she did so in this by republishing the first book. This time with comprehensive information and clarifications. The book still has the future I saw, with the same title, was no longer only a collection of short fantasies, but had changed into a thorough record of all she possessed, observed what she had recorded and what she had brought with her during the years, and Tatsuki's return disclosed some personal information about herself. Was born in 1954 on December 2nd. Prefecture of Kanagawa, and now resides in the port of Yokohama. Her early years were uneventful, much like compared to millions of other Japanese. She adored youngsters in the post-war period. Drawing, singing, dreaming, and delicate. However, there was one item that few other people had begun at that age. At the age of 9, she began to have dreams that were not like those of the average person in these nightmares. An elderly man with soft eyes, silver-white hair, and a sluggish, peaceful voice he would frequently show up next to and inform her of the things that had not yet realized they would converse and dreaming together while strolling beneath her. The old man would mutter in the moonlight. Things she would only learn about comprehend many years later. The first dream that actually uncomfortable. She arrived in 1976. On a November evening, Tatsuki had a dream of a man singing in the intense light of stage lights, just to abruptly collapse behind that fading and blurred light. The throng below let forth a startled cry, and she recognized the man right away. Freddie Mercury, the primary vocalist of Freddie Mercury and Queen in 1976 when his career was at its height, his health lively, his voice resonating through stadiums across the world. To claim he would have died in the same way. Rather than inviting public mockery, however, rather than dismissing it, Tatsuki silently drew the dream and cautiously wrote it down in her journal. On November 24, 1991, 15 years later, the Freddie's news rocked the world. Television had lost Mercury. Special reports were presented on television. His picture appeared in newspapers on their top pages, and upon opening her Tatsuki ancient notebook that she found hard to believe what she witnessed for the first time, was terrified of herself, terrified that dreams were no longer only that, dreams. And what sent when she switched on the television a more intense shiver down her back wasn't the actual news of Freddie's passing, but a snippet of documentary video demonstrating fans getting ready to create a biography movie in his remembrance. In a diary from 1976, there had been a little, basic frame illustration of a movie crew preparing a scene regarding a deceased artist. The likeness was unsettlingly accurate. Tatsuki attempted to persuade herself that everything was only a strange coincidence, yet in her heart she understood that perfect coincidences are infrequently unintentional. From then on, her dreams started to show up more frequently, and they began to materialize in accordance with odd temporal patterns. Some would occur 5, 10, or more years later, precisely 15 years after they were observed. So she started recording everything, leaving no trace of the establishing the names, colors, and sounds, the duration, and even the sentimental feelings that went along with them. The dream took place on August 31st, 1992. She noticed that she was strolling down a long hallway with a plenty of natural light, tall windows. At the conclusion of a portrait of a blonde was displayed in the hallway. Dana was a woman with a child in her arms. Inscribed throughout the canvas and in the immediately after, there was a dazzling illuminate, the shattering clang of metal. And 5 years later, many people's cries. Prior to August 31st, 1997, the world was Princess Diana had once more died in shock. A vehicle collision in Paris, and once more, according to Tatsuki's journal, the event from years ago that was simply drawing so striking that they were eerie. Beginning in 1995, the foretelling dreams increased in frequency, and they started to touch on issues that are far larger in scope. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and other natural calamities and geological disturbances outside of the dominance of humanity. And the reason for this was with the increasing urgency with which she started to illustrate the book that would one day. I'll look for the future. Music, observed Tatsuki on a wintry night in 1995. I had a dream about the elderly man with silver hair. In the dream, he guided her once more to a weird place where the ground had broken open, and there was a lot of the stifling smell of stone. Tatsuki woke up in the middle of the dust night with an eerie feeling of foreboding. She opened her journal the following morning and meticulously noted the day of the dream on January 2nd, 1995. She then sketched the scenario of a ruined terrain and underneath it typed something in a single line. Will burst in 15 days. And exactly 15 days later, on December 17th, 1995, the Great Hanshin, the Kobe earthquake, is another name for nearly 6,500 people died in the earthquake. Tens of thousands of homes were lost, fell, and Japan, a nation constructed on resilience and order, were remained dreadfully exposed to the power of. In that instant, Tatsuki did not. She no longer questioned her ability to persuade herself that what she thought that witnessing was just a coincidence. The assurance that the future was sending her cues with conviction that these cautions weren't intended to stay confined inside the pages of in his private journal. Tatsuki started gathering the dreams she had recorded over a number of years, after which she formally released The Future I Saw but as a manga. What left many individuals bewildered was this: as soon as the book was published and Tatsuki vanished once more in 1999, and maybe that's where the narrative would have finished. If it weren't for one further dream, a dream so intense and pressing that it forced her to shatter more than 2 years of quiet on a July evening in 2021, Tatsuki woke up startled. The breath came quickly, and cold sweat stuck to her forehead was where she had imagined standing. Alone in a huge water field under where there is no sunlight, the sky is ashy. The water to the south of Japan started to bubble. Then from the ocean's depths twisting, 2 giant dragons appeared, and flailing as if they were ripping at the planet's crust, followed by the sound of a blast, followed by quiet as the land was completely ingested, and she became aware that this vision was an extension of an older eyesight from 1999. But it was much more obvious this time, and much more aggressive. The recurrence was she couldn't ignore it. Continue to say nothing. Thus in 2023 Tatsuki's book was republished in a more full edition one, which featured new dreams and, above all, a warning alerting people to an impending disaster that was drawing constantly but had not yet arrived. Nearer in her dream, she was standing at a huge tall enough for her to view that the whole marine area south of Japan sprawled like a live thing underneath her. Map in 3 dimensions initially, the ocean was eerily serene, but in a short huge air pockets started to rise. Rising up from the ocean floor like massive cauldrons swirling underneath the crust of the earth was the obvious indication of a submerged volcano on the about to explode. But what she could remember what it had burned itself into, she recalled the appearance of 2 massive dragons that they twisted underneath the surface of the water, slowly developing from the scene's margins into shape silently. They swung around in the middle of the rising bubbles, as though protecting anything that's underneath, and then, suddenly, a huge column of tearing across the waves. Water exploded the sky and causing a wave to erupt outside anything that the human mind could conjure up. Tatsuki was immobile and stood motionless, as 3 times as tall as those waves of the catastrophe that struck in 2011, tugging along with them toward the coast. Dust clouds, automobiles, buildings, and millions of individuals. She couldn't recall her breathing. All she knew in that dream was that a new land started to rise following the wave. It slowly rose to the surface of the sea like an ancient creature awakening from sleep that was thousands of years old. Stone heaving caused by wet soil churning upward into rough, jagged shapes, and unharmed. And at that same moment, Tatsuki was certain that this new territory would link Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan, and the Philippines into a single, uninterrupted territory. When there is pandemonium, most individuals only consider, however, in Tatsuki's dream, the conclusion brought with it a fresh start. Chapter 1. Humanity does not anticipate it or ready for, but was unable to reject, and what caused the dream to be so. What Tatsuki had witnessed was much more terrifying. The precise day it would occur, which was clearly written at 5 a.m. on July 5, 2025. Maybe she realized that many would be skeptical, that she would be laughed at, rejecting it as superstition. However, she also understood this: if you were one of the millions who read only a few of these words, thought and got ready in case the dream, if the loss were to occur, it might not as excellent. Some others thought Tatsuki's dream was just rather than a sign of overwhelming worry to the people who had followed her chain. However, prophesied dating back to the 1970s, they realized one thing with clarity. In her dreams, Tatsuki observed that rejected without any thought. So the largest question after her reissue book, particularly with its harsh admonition, this was a new continent in 2025. Could something like that really occur? That, to the astonishment of many, the answer is yes. Even though the likelihood is slim, it nevertheless completely feasible. At least in principle, Japan is located in a geological zone, referred to as the Ring of Fire, in the Pacific. Location of several tectonic plates of the crust of the Earth converge, as well as the region with the greatest concentration of world's underwater volcanoes. These tectonic plates are constantly shifting, change year after year, inch by inch. They produce volcanic outbursts and earthquakes, and occasionally they produce new land. Only 500 meters off the coast in 2013, Nishinoyama Island's coast in Japan, a submerged volcano silently erupted, establishing a tiny island that had previously showed up on any map in a matter of months. Its area grew quickly, ultimately becoming one with the main island and tripling the total size of Nishinoyama in 2021. There was another instance in the Kuril Islands, our disputed area between Russia and Japan. There is an underwater volcano erupted out of nowhere, without any previous notice. When meteorologists showed up by helicopter to examine the location, they learned that a new island had developed. Despite their small scale, These occurrences demonstrated that what she saw in her dreams wasn't completely unrealistic. Therefore, we go back to her dream from 2021. The year Tatsuki witnessed two huge dragons squirming beneath the if we exclude the metaphorical images. See for a brief period. Numerous researchers have highlighted an intriguing element that where the two dragons are located in Tatsuki's sketches that nearly correspond to the site beneath the two main tectonic plates, the Philippine Sea Plate and the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Plate is located exactly at when these two plates meet, indicates the probability of becoming submerged, highest rate of volcanic eruption. And if the circumstances were ideal, including the seafloor could be pushed by an explosion upward, creating whole new sections of land. If there's one life goal that causes Tatsuki to awaken, gasping for breath, not in fear, but due to the feeling of loss in that particular dream, the dream she had was all too real. Sometime in the latter part of the 1990s, she penned in her journal, but only a lot of years later, she finally acknowledged that she had never been quite prepared to disclose that envision the world, not because she feared incredulity, but since she was afraid that individuals would be completely unable to take action in the dream. A loud noise came from deep within. Inside the soil, so strong that even while sleeping, she felt her spine tense. Was a noise that sounded like an old howl, like though the earth's crust itself were exploding somewhere when she woke up. In the dream, the clock in front of her read precisely 5 o'clock, but there was no way to determine if it was 5 o'clock in the Tatsuki. In the morning or the afternoon when she left her house, she discovered that everything had fallen apart. Roads were broken. Tall structures had their basements blasted apart as if an unseen hand had ripped the whole thing apart. Blocks of earthly concrete automobiles, a skew canopy was lying down, and power lines came and went like the remains of a city that was previously prosperous. She saw a magnificent bridge that crosses a river. However, its the second half had left her there. The roadway ahead of her was deserted, bleak, and as Tatsuki glanced down, she became aware that she was no more standing firmly ground in front of and behind her stretched only water. Then, as soon as she woke up, she felt like everything had reached a climax. Final moment I saw when the future was reissued. A note was attached by Tatsuki underneath this. I'm not sure if this scene in my dream is it related to the 2011 earthquake, because what I saw was much more terrible. I continued to wear a blouse with short sleeves, despite the fact that March as Japan remains quite cold. That particular feature of her donning of the short-sleeve top made me shiver. For the 2011 tsunami, many spines occurred during winter, although Tatsuki's dream bore the characteristics of summer, and in 2025, her desire did come true. In the summer season, you might not think that dreams are real. Could believe that the future is something that no one can ever really get inside. However, if there was something in advance this tale caused you to stop, even forgive it some thought, then feel free to tell us what you think. I'm always willing to read them below, and to accompanying you in delving more into the items that are not yet completely recognized. And if you want to go on investigating tales such as this one, don't forget to activate the subscription notification bell. I'll be back in the following video.